Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 97.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Matt Miller. He's the owner of School Spirit Vending, and he tells us his story of starting a business and having his kids help him in the business as a way to help pay for college and also get some tax advantages, etc. So if you are an owner of a business, or you think you might want to start some sort of business, either as your full-time career or maybe a business on the side, there's a lot of great information in this podcast to help you understand, some of your options and how it may work and help you pay for college. As always, show notes are available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/episode97. Let's go ahead and jump into the interview. All right, today we've got a great interview with Matt Miller. He is the owner of School Spirit Vending. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Brad. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you. So can you tell us a little bit more about what it is that you do and why parents of high school kids would care?
Good question. I was formerly an Air Force pilot. I was in the advertising space for over 10 years. And along the way, realized that the expenses of a growing family and kids getting older and that type of thing were a lot bigger than I ever anticipated. And so along the way, in interest of trying to provide for my family and do some things that I never thought possible in the early years, originally we started a candy and gumball business that after several years morphed into what we do today, School Spirit Vending, which we are a school fundraising company. We essentially develop custom spirit stickers for schools across the country, and then we place sticker machines in the schools, and it ends up being a passive fundraiser for the school. And as a franchisor, we also set up families around the country, duplicating and teaching them how to do what we do in their area, giving them an opportunity to develop a secondary income stream that's more passive in nature and support local education along the way.
Wow, great. Let's talk a little bit more about your story, because I think what you've done and applies as well. So I guess talking offline, you've got a number of children. Can you tell us a little bit about where they're at in their college career at this point?
Yeah, so we've got 3 kids. My oldest, Zane, is a junior at Hillsdale College in Hillsdale, Michigan. My middle daughter, Sarah, is a freshman at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. We're in Central Texas ourselves, and my youngest, Rebecca, actually turns 15 today and is very excited about going down to the DMV in a little bit and getting her learner's permit.
Wow.
So we got a couple years yet before she's off to school, but definitely have our hands full with all the activities and everything she's involved in here.
So then, as you were launching your business, did your children participate, or tell us a little bit about that?
One of the things that frustrated me in the corporate world was the fact that it was always me and a bunch of people oftentimes that, none of us really liked each other that much, really. It was, a relationship due to necessity. And I've always been a family-oriented, family-focused in all that I've done. And so when we started a company, we wanted to make sure that our kids were actively involved. My hope being that if they wanted to be an entrepreneur along the way and potentially never work for somebody else as they got older, they'd have a skill set or skills that they could utilize to take care of themselves and their family on down the road. And when I started SSV 9 years ago, I realized really quickly that graphic design was going to be a very big part of what we do and very expensive. And my 10-year-old son at the time was really intrigued and interested in computers and all that. So I got an iMac and I got the Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator suite and got those, hooked him up with a good buddy of mine who was a trained Hollywood commercial editor and graphic designer. And Zane spent 2 hours working in his yard in exchange for 2 hours of training on Photoshop and Illustrator. That started him off as the very first graphic designer at 10 years old of our company. And he's now been doing that for over 9 years, working for us. But today he works for companies all over the country, doing not only design work, but web design, app design. He was actually just asked to be on the marketing team and design team for Hillsdale College itself, starting this next semester, because the folks there at the university noticed his work initially in his dormitory, the work he was doing there, and then at the fraternity that he's a part of, to where he's actually going to be, on quote unquote supporting the staff of the school in their marketing efforts starting in January.
Right. So this all started with a desire to start a family business, and it kind of grew from there. So when you started out, was it full-time, part-time? Did you kind of work, ease your way into it?
Yeah, I didn't have a choice. I had to ease my way into it. There was no way with 5 mouths to feed that I could just step off a cliff and hope that we survived. So everything for years and years was done bootstrapping in my part-time. I was burning the candle at both ends for a lot of years there. In fact, there was a period of time where I was working full-time in the advertising industry. I was working my candy and gumball and toy route in local area businesses. I was delivering pizzas for Pizza Hut at night and on the weekends, and then I was growing School Spirit Vending. So it was always done on the side. I didn't feel like I had the right to risk, all that I had put together for my family by just jumping off into business. So we fit it in where we could, and we're very patient over a period of a number of years. But slowly but surely, this thing began to come together as we added more locations ourselves to begin with. And then what was really kind of cool is we had a bunch of people around us start reaching out and saying, hey, I want to do what you do. Would you teach me? And so that led to us becoming a distributorship model with a licensing agreement with folks. And then about 1.5 years ago, we became a franchise. And today we work with families similar to ours in about 36 or 37 states. We've got 75 franchisees that are family businesses, most of which have their kids actively involved in what they do as well. And along the way, we're not only helping families develop secondary income streams to help pay for things like college and all that, but also encouraging multi-generational entrepreneurship and giving kids hopefully the tools to be entrepreneurs at a much earlier age than most of us adults ever had an opportunity to do.
Right, absolutely. So as a college planner, I like the idea of students working from a planning perspective. So this would apply not only if you were to go out and start a business or you already have a business, but when I'm working with families of any sort that have the family restaurant or mom's a realtor or whatever it might be, there are a lot of advantages to running your own business in that, as an example, you can control your income a little bit as far as financial aid is concerned. Now, sometimes, if life is really good and income is really high, then maybe there's nothing you can do. You're just not going to qualify for aid. But on top of that, you can do things as what you mentioned, where you have the kids in the business and pay them a salary. And the good news about paying the kids a salary is the kids pay taxes on it instead of mom and dad. Hopefully, maybe not hopefully, but likely your student pays a lot less in taxes than mom and dad does.
Yeah, I mean, the tax rates are such that, the small amount that they are earning is taxed at a lower rate for sure. Our whole philosophy, Brad, from the very beginning has been, we've never done an allowance or anything like that. At about 13 years old, our kids started, having to earn the money for a lot of what they needed aside from the basic necessities. And our philosophy is the same in relation to college. We are paying our kids' way through school. We committed to do that early on and have been blessed to be able to do that. Though, to be honest, 5 years ago, there's no way I could have even, thought of doing something like that. But they pay for their books. They pay for all their, hanging out and going out and all that kind of thing. And, we require them to be doing some work either for us or to have a job on campus while they're in school, so that they begin to see that tie between work and income, which is going to lead to a very, very rude awakening for many kids once they graduate from college. So we're hoping to soften that blow and that transition a little bit, but also believe that the only way they're going to be able to provide for themselves is if they learn how to do that as early as possible. So we start them off pretty early, comparatively speaking. And, they haven't been spoon-fed all along the way in that regard.
Right. I'm actually hired my son, Zach, into my business as well, and he's doing similar things where, Windows 10 came through, and he's in our office updating all 9 or 10 computers to Windows 10 so that I didn't have to deal with it. And, so he made some money and learned a little bit, and it worked out pretty well. And then he can go buy his own games and his own football gear and et cetera, et cetera. So do you think there's a shift, or have you noticed a shift, as I have, where once the kids are earning the money, it gets spent differently, it gets spent more thoughtfully, it just kind of changes their perspective on how money, the value of money and what it really means?
I think it definitely does. That being said, until they really are out on their own, I don't think they have any concept of how expensive it is to live in society today. But the reality is I've spent money on stupid things all along my life too. So the fact that the kids at an early age are doing similar things shouldn't be a surprise and shouldn't be frustrating to any of us. But my hope is that they're learning that tie much sooner, because, like I said, my son's 2.5 years away from being out on his own, and going from, the nest and the relative safety and security of mom and dad's home to having to figure it all out on his own. And that's a huge transition that I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of kids that are sadly ill prepared for today. Number one, I don't think oftentimes they're really going to school with a goal in mind and just feel like, well, school is what everybody expects me to do. So they potentially have a ton of debt or whatever, and not really sure what they're going to do with their life. I think that's a real challenge, and then of course, just the debt load that in so many cases today, kids are strapped with. As the costs of education continue to rise. I wish that college wasn't so important a thing, because though I think it has value, I was a history major in school. I've never used a lick of what I learned while I was in school, but the act of going through the Air Force Academy, accomplishing, succeeding, making it through, all had huge value. But I think you and I would both agree the real learning occurs, after school is over, and is just starting at that point.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of times parents struggle with that, of what type of major should their kids take. And, what if it's not a lucrative major? Everybody kind of focuses on, well, they should take, a hard science or nursing or accounting or something that, it's essentially job training, right? If you get a nursing degree, what you learn in school is how to be a nurse, and you use it when you go off and become a nurse. And then there's people out there that are very much for the liberal arts kind of thing. We're going to learn how to learn. We're going to expand our horizons, and then we'll worry about how to apply that, if it even applies to whatever career we're going to. I don't know what side of that camp you land on, but it's a never-ending argument. Let's put it that way.
We're on the liberal arts side of things. I'm a firm believer that if my kids can learn how to communicate verbally, written, and otherwise, and can have a well-rounded education, they'll figure out what they're going to do with their life and how to make money, and will always be an asset to any company out there in the process. I just believe if we too narrowly focus where we're heading, it significantly limits things. It's like most graphic designers, not most, but as a generalization, you envision a graphic designer sitting behind a computer and doing most of what they do on that device. Well, because of that, there's a lot of incredible designers out there, but I've found over the years there's a lot of them that are very, very, very poor communicators. Well, you got to kind of have both.
Right.
And anybody can learn a skill like graphic design or whatever, but to be able to communicate effectively with people, whether it be online or in person or what have you, is a skill that is rare in a field like that. So in my son Zane's case, by him having a liberal arts degree, learning design along the way at home and now doing that at school as well, in my opinion anyway, he's much more well-rounded and much more prepared for whatever comes his way. Because the reality is he has no clue what he's going to be doing 5 years from now, nor do I. And the economy in our society is changing so quickly. We all got to be fleet of foot in today's day and age if we want to survive and be able to provide.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't remember the exact statistics, but there's a whole talk of a lot of the careers that our kids will be in 5 and 10 years from now haven't been invented yet. It's kind of, if you look back at like the cell phone industry, most people don't have a cell phone degree related job because they didn't exist when they were in college. So that, they hadn't been invented yet. Therefore, there was no degree on how to program a cell phone or how to build a cell phone or how to sell a cell phone, et cetera, et cetera. So all the people that are, kind of learned on the job, and they learned some way, they transferred skills from some other career or major and got involved in the industry.
Right.
And I think another big thing that I see, and, the path that you're taking makes a big difference, is there's a lot of kids out there who study hard in school and they get good grades. And once they graduate, they feel like the world owes them a job. The challenge there, of course, is most companies looking at a typical graduate says, well, what can you do for me and why should I pay you well? And if they can't see it, they're not going to do it. Now, granted, there are some large companies that have training programs where they say we're going to bring in a bunch of young new hires, realizing that they're not going to be useful for a year or two, but at least we're going to get them in our training program. Well, they'll learn the ropes and then eventually they'll become useful. But you and I, as small business owners, have no interest in that, most likely, I'm guessing. And I don't want to speak for you, but I know for me, I don't want to bring someone on and train them for 2 years before they're useful. Some of the things that your kids are doing are kind of learning the ropes, learning how to communicate, learning how to sell, learning, et cetera, et cetera. And I think those soft skills, again, there's not classes on those types of things. It's life and what you get involved in.
I think oftentimes we as parents don't give our kids enough credit for what they're capable of. I'll give you a great example. It's a silly little story, but it just kind of proves the point. My youngest, Becca, like I said, just turned 15 today. Well, back when she was 8 years old, she was in Sunday school class one Sunday morning. And at the time, she was actually in the class with all the 9-year-olds just because of the schedule at the church and this and that. So she was temporarily there. Well, the teacher asked, so what's something that you love to do to help your parents around the house? And the kids, all went around the room and said this and that. Well, Rebecca said, I love to mow the lawn. And all the kids turned around and looked at her and their jaws dropped. They were all a year older than her, and none of them had ever even thought about helping mom and dad mow the lawn because mom and dad had never empowered them to learn how to mow the lawn. So here Rebecca was a year younger than all of them, which at that age, a year is a big, big deal. Mm-hmm. And she was doing stuff that none of them had ever even fathomed to do. Well, that's just one example of, in our home, we have always, raised expectations and had high expectations for our kids and made them valuable parts of our family entity, our family businesses, et cetera, instead of being just a pure drag on the family, just doing school or this or that or whatever. We've got a homestead here in Central Texas with 6 acres. We raise, chickens and ducks and geese. We raise pigs on occasion. We've done a lot of that kind of stuff as well. And our kids are an integral part of that whole setup. We couldn't do it without them. But in the process, they've learned how to make some money. They've learned valuable life skills that they may never use in their life, or then again, they may have to use someday in their life. And we've empowered them as early as we possibly can, to do and to be and serve as an adult. My daughter, Rebecca, she has worked trade shows with me for years. And at, 9, 10 years old, was there talking about our company and what we do with PTA moms and principals and all that, from all across the state of Texas and Oklahoma and other states in this part of the country. She stumbled over her words and looked pretty silly to begin with, but she has learned along the way by doing and in the process. I did a PTA show in Texas here this last July, and we did interviews for my podcast of a bunch of different companies that were in attendance at that show. And as I was doing the interviews, she was the one at 15 going around to all those companies asking them if they had a desire to be on the show, and then scheduling them into my calendar in those 2 days while we worked the event, at 15 years old. Why? Because we have given her an opportunity to learn over the years, to where at 15, she's very, very comfortable in a situation like that.
And I think that's an important thing to realize, is that, again, kids are very capable if they want to be and if they are allowed to be. But I think a lot of society today is, the helicopter parent, I'm going to schedule my kids' schedule for them, it's kind of taken over for a lot of families. And, so there are alternatives to that, I guess.
We've allowed our kids each to do one activity at a time. So they've been active in sports and in other clubs and that type of thing. But it hasn't consumed our life. And they've learned a ton from it, and we've enjoyed doing it. But we haven't been chasing them around all over the place from dawn till dusk, because, we've got a life we've got to live too. And there's very practical things that have to get done every day. Another thing that a lot of folks are going to think is really probably weird, but we don't have a game system in our home. We never have. We do have a TV, and, we still as a family will watch, with our DVR stuff or whatever, and have done that for years. But we've decided not to participate in a lot of that stuff. And our kids are not perfect. They now have their cell phones, and they're texting and Snapchatting and all that stuff too. Don't get me wrong. But we don't necessarily have to embrace where society's going if we don't want to, and if we have other wants, needs, and desires for our family that we can articulate and that we can teach.
Absolutely. All right, let's change gears a little bit. You obviously, you mentioned that you're out there and providing franchise help to families and that kind of stuff. So if I'm a parent and I'm thinking about, I like that idea of let's start a side business, whether it's in your franchise or something that they, another skill that they have or whatever it is, what do you think the parents kind of need to know? I mean, what do you wish someone would have told you as you started rolling into this side business idea, as far as from technical things like accounting and business entities, or where do people start? What do they need to learn first?
I think the biggest thing, Brad, is folks need to realize it's not as big a deal as you make it out to be. This business and got to do this and got to get a business account and taxes and all that. That's why there are professionals out there that understand all those things, so that you and I don't have to. So don't make it as big a deal as it really is. You start small, you learn as you go. I've learned along the ways that there are very few decisions that you can make and risks that you can take that you can't recover from fairly quickly. So be empowered and know that you can do it. The people like myself and like yourself, Brad, who are in business, have just been doing it for a while. I didn't have any clue what I was doing when I got started, but I was willing to get started. The other thing I would tell folks is I see too many people around get what I call knowledge constipation. They're getting ready to get ready to get ready to get ready to get ready to do something. The ducks are never all going to be in a row. The lights are never all going to be green on the road that you're looking to drive down to go wherever you're heading. And the same thing is true in business. When I started School Spirit Vending 9 years ago, this next month, I thought I knew what SSV was going to become. I had no clue, but I got started and I was willing to pivot along the way as my customers talked and as we learned by doing. You got to get in the game, and you're going to mess up a lot. Failure is okay as long as you learn from it. In fact, I encourage it. I'm the guy that will go out and figure it out as I go. I'm the guy that if I get a brand new grill from the local box store, I'm going to figure out the 3 ways not to put it together before my wife comes out and gets the instructions and we actually figured it out right. But you know what? I've learned a lot in that process, and that's the way I've always learned. Don't be scared of that. It's not that big a deal. The other thing I would say is, your business is not going to grow as fast as you think. It's going to cost more than you think, and it's going to take longer than you think. So plan on that. Don't sacrifice what you're currently doing in your full-time career for something that may be on down the road. You got to learn how to kind of walk and chew gum at the same time for a while and figure things out. And one of the things I love about today is the internet empowers us, and the tools that are available today to do things so much more simply than ever before. Simple things like utilizing a scheduling app, today that I use for a lot of my appointments and interviews and all that stuff, to where I don't have an assistant calling people and scheduling the majority of what I do. I've got technology that very inexpensively can do that task for me. And there's so many other examples like that out there today, but you got to get in the game and you got to be willing to figure it out while doing what you do full time to keep food on the table and a roof over your head.
Absolutely. So if we're interested in getting out there and starting something, I know for your business, you've got an ebook. Can you tell us a little bit more about, what you have available and where we can find it?
A lot of professionals have no clue really what vending is all about. And I got started in vending, Brad, purely because I needed something that could yield results almost immediately. And I was, I've done stuff online, I've tracked stuff online and all that for years. But in a lot of ways, the internet to me is just kind of voodoo. And I'm slowly learning about it now as I'm hiring people to help me accomplish what I want to accomplish moving forward. But the beauty of a vending machine, and I started out with a used candy and gumball machine that I got on eBay for $36, is the fact you get the machine, you get the candy, you get a location, and a couple weeks later, there's results, real results from that. So that's why I hung my hat on vending, is because for the time that I put in, I knew that I could see results. Today, my ebook is called Live Your Dreams, the Top 10 Reasons Why You Need to Own a Vending Business. And it talks about some of the concepts that most of us professionals have never thought of before, and why vending can be such a great fit to what you're doing. For those folks that have interest in learning more about what we do on the franchise level, I'd love to talk with them about that as well if they choose. But they can go to ssvbusiness.com/taming college and download a copy of that for free. And then we can talk from there if they like.
All right. Well, great. And we were going to put all the links in the show notes at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com. So you can go there and look up this episode, and all the links to Matt's information as well as anything else will be there. All right, Matt. Well, that was a lot of great information. Any final thoughts before we let you go?
No, Brad, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be on the show. And like I said, there's so much opportunity out there today. And I just challenge, your audience to get your kids involved, to give them more responsibility than you've ever thought you could, and do all you can to better prepare them for life as an adult, because it's going to happen a lot quicker than you think.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Matt, and we'll stay in touch.
Thanks. God bless.
Bye-bye. All right. That was a great interview with Matt. Hopefully you're inspired now and are considering going out there and working hard in some form of business. And again, as a reminder, if you are a business owner of any sort, if you're self-employed, you're a realtor or own a business or a restaurant or whatever it might be, a professional like an accountant, attorney, etc., there's a lot of great ways that you can use the fact that you own the business to help plan and pay for college. In other words, you might be able to hire the kids in the business or adjust your income so you qualify for more or less aid, depending on what you need to do there. So there's a lot of flexibility and opportunities by owning a business. And then for those of you that do not own a business currently, you can start what we would call a side hustle or a side business, where you may be able to, drive Uber on the side would be a up-and-coming example, but also all kinds of different ways, vending as mentioned in this podcast, but all kinds of ways that families earn additional money, whether it's starting a small business, a lawn mowing business, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of ways you could do it. It's just a matter of deciding that you want to do it and taking some action and getting it going. All right, that's all we have for today. As always, we appreciate reviews at iTunes or in the new Google Play area. That's all we have this week. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns two companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.